Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We hope you had a great weekend, and we're so glad that you're with us. I'm Eric Ham, and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And coming up on Firstpost America, we've got all the top stories from the United States and around the world. But before we get to all of that, here's a look at the latest headlines. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says his country will seek new export markets in Africa and Asia as Pretoria continues talks with Washington to avoid President Donald Trump's 30% trade tariffs. South Korea begins dismantling loudspeakers blaring anti-North Korea propaganda along the border as President Lee Jae-myung's new government moves to ease tensions with Pyongyang. A Malaysian hotel tycoon who helped bring Formula One to Singapore pleads guilty to obstruction of justice in a rare corruption case that last year saw a former transport minister land behind bars. Beijing issues its highest rainstorm alert, warning of heavy downpours until Tuesday morning, days after deadly floods swept through parts of the capital and prompted a rare apology from unprepared officials. And oil prices fall over 1% after OPEC countries agreed to boost output in September, even as investors remain cautious amid President Trump's threats of further U.S. sanctions on Russia. We begin in Washington, where President Donald Trump's confirmed that his special envoy Steve Witkoff will travel to Russia this week to hold high-level talks on ending the war in Ukraine. Responding to the visit, the Kremlin said that Witkoff's upcoming visit would be important and helpful. Now, Witkoff's trip to Russia comes just days before President Trump's self-imposed deadline for Russia to agree to a ceasefire or face a new round of sanctions. Speaking to reporters on Sunday, President Trump was direct when asked what Russia could do to avoid penalties, stating, "Get a deal where people stop getting killed."
Yeah, get a deal where people stop getting killed. They had a number that just came out that a tremendous number of Russian soldiers are being killed. And likewise, Ukraine, a lower number, but still thousands and thousands of people. And now we're adding towns where they're being hit by missiles. So it's a lot of people being killed in that ridiculous war.
President Trump further warned that if Moscow fails to act, his administration would impose very severe tariffs on Russia and possibly on their trading partners. He added secondary tariffs could target key nations like India and China, escalating the pressure put, but also risking disruption in global trade.
Well, there'll be sanctions, but they seem to be pretty good at avoiding sanctions. You know, they're wily characters, and they're pretty good at avoiding sanctions. And he may be going, I think next week, Wednesday or Thursday, may be going to Russia. They would like to see him. They've asked that he meet, so we'll see what happens.
And in a surprising move, last week, President Trump also repositioned 2 U.S. nuclear submarines in the region following a heated online exchange with former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. They are where they have to be, the president said, but offered no clarification on whether the submarines were nuclear-powered or nuclear-armed. Nor did he disclose their exact location, information typically kept classified by the U.S. military.
Oh, yeah, well, we had to do that. We just have to be careful. And a threat was made, and we didn't think it was appropriate, so I have to be very careful. So I do that on the basis of safety for our people. A threat was made by a former president of Russia, and we're going to protect our people.
This nuclear posturing follows a recent escalation in the rhetoric between President Trump and Medvedev, who currently serves as deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. Now, in mid-July, President Trump also announced on Truth Social that Russia had 10 days to secure a ceasefire or face tariffs along with its oil buyers, and the deadline ends this Friday.
Yeah, I'd say 10 to 12 days. I'll announce it probably tonight or tomorrow. But there's no reason to wait. If you know what the answer is going to be, why wait? And it would be sanctions and maybe tariffs, secondary tariffs. You know what a secondary tariff is.
Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine rages on, and as Russia has continued its aerial assault with an attack on last Thursday on a Kyiv apartment building, killing 31 people. The strike capped off a record month of over 6,000 long-range drone attacks on Ukraine in July, which was 14 times higher than the previous month. Ukraine, however, is striking back. In fact, over the weekend, its drones targeted several sites across Russia, killing 3 people and sparking a massive fire at an oil refinery. Now, despite the ongoing fighting, diplomacy does continue. Russia and Ukraine have held several meetings in recent months in Istanbul, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced yesterday that the latest round had produced an agreement to exchange 1,200 prisoners. And so as President Trump prepares to send his trusted envoy to Moscow, the stakes are in fact climbing. Nuclear submarines are in position, sanctions loom, and the world waits to see whether Russia will blink or whether something far more insidious lies ahead. And staying in the United States, Harvard University is facing fresh scrutiny and scandal, this time over its alleged ties to the Chinese Communist Party. A new congressional inquiry reportedly claims the Ivy League school maintained formal ties for over a decade with organizations run by the Chinese Communist Party's Central Organization Department. Now, interestingly, this department is in charge of training China's future political leaders and promoting the Xi Jinping thought across the country's governing system. Now, at the heart of the allegations is Harvard's Kennedy School, which is allegedly said to have collaborated closely with the Chinese Executive Leadership Academy in Pudong, a CCP-run institution that allegedly trains party cadres and officials. A letter from Republican Congress members John Molinar, Tim Walberg, and Elise Stefanik says whistleblowers claim CCP officials were sent to Harvard as part of a party training program. This has raised concerns about foreign influence on the American soil.
Harvard's formal partnership with a CCP-controlled school to train their future leaders raises serious concerns about the CCP's influence in American institutions. We are committed to uncovering the full extent of these relationships to ensure transparency and protect national interests.
These latest allegations come at a time when Harvard is already under pressure, facing criticism from President Trump over campus anti-Semitism and its controversial DEI policies. The White House has sledged federal funding for the university while also implementing measures to curb the entry of international students. The Trump administration has also attempted to strip Harvard from a key student immigration database and has reportedly instructed U.S. embassies to reject visas for foreign nationals hoping to study at the university. Just last month, the government opened an investigation into Harvard's eligibility to host visiting scholars and academics. Officials argue that these moves are legally grounded, citing the university's inability to protect Jewish students amid escalating protests over the war in Gaza. Meanwhile, Harvard has rebuffed the president's demands for greater oversight of its teaching content, hiring practices, admission policies, and intellectual balance. The university has also filed a lawsuit seeking to unfreeze over $2 billion in government funds. But reports now indicate it may be considering a $500 million settlement to end its standoff with the Trump administration. Back in April, another report linked Harvard to training members of the Xi Jinping Production and Construction Corps, a CCP paramilitary group sanctioned for its role in repression of Uyghur Muslims. So far, Harvard has not commented on these accusations, but the Republican lawmakers have given the university until August 7th to submit all records of its alleged involvement with CCP-affiliated bodies. Still, the overarching question remains whether Harvard, intentionally or not, facilitated the training of China's next generation of leaders, leaving its global reputation at risk. And now moving to the Middle East, where Syria is once again on edge. Fresh waves of violence have erupted overnight, shaking the already fragile region and pushing the country's transitional government closer to chaos. Clashes broke out in both the north and south, casting doubt on President Ahmad al-Shara's ability to stabilize Syria after Bashar al-Assad's ouster in December. In the southern province of Sweida, fierce fighting resumed between Syrian government-affiliated forces and armed druze factions, ending a brief and uneasy ceasefire that followed deadly clashes last month. According to state media, the violence began when Druze fighters attacked Syrian internal security forces, killing 5 and injuring several others. Clashes also broke out near the southwestern city of Thala, with shelling and gunfire heard across Sweida. Reports suggest government forces have begun a siege, cutting off road and supplies to pressure locals. Meanwhile, Swedish humanitarian crisis continues to worsen. And though some aid convoys have reached the city, residents say it's far from enough. And the road connecting Sweida to Damascus has been blocked since mid-July. In fact, government-aligned armed groups are reportedly behind the closure despite blaming Druze fighters for it.
People need water. People need food. People need fuel. People need electricity. Today, the city's citizens help each other. Whoever has a piece of bread, they distribute it to others. I have a home eastern the meteorology building. A group of 16 people came to me. They burnt and destroyed without asking who I am.
Locals claim the blockade is a tactic by Damascus to force submission. And last month's violence killed around 1,400 people and displaced tens of thousands, further straining the region's fragile ethnic balance.
Syria's transition has been rocked this past month by violence and escalation that led to mass casualties, drained trust, and created more dangers of fragmentation. It is clear that some major course corrections on security and the political transition are needed.
Meanwhile, near Quneitra, near the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, Israeli forces carried out ground raids. And Israel has stepped up its operations in southern Syria since Assad's fall, citing threats from militant groups and a commitment to protect the Druze, many of whom also live in Israel. Jerusalem has previously struck military sites in southern Syria and even hit the defense ministry in Damascus during Swedish earlier unrest. And now all of this comes as interim President Sharara struggles to hold the country together. He came to power after leading a surprise insurgency promising to protect Syria's minorities. And now all of this comes as interim President Ahmad al-Shara struggles to hold the country together. And he came to power after leading a surprise insurgency promising to protect Syria's minorities, but critics point to his Islamist ties and cooperation with fighters linked to al-Qaeda. His government has already been accused of failing to prevent the massacre of Alawites in March and now faces renewed bloodshed in the Druze majority south. The government inquiry into July's violence just held its first meeting, but on the ground, bullets and bombs seem to be speaking louder than any promise. With fires flaring in the north, south, and even along its borders, it's anyone's guess if Syria's fragile new leadership can stop the country from spiraling further into chaos. Boeing is facing yet another major setback, and this time it's from within. Over 3,000 unionized workers at the company's fighter jet facilities have gone on strike, and this follows their rejection of what Boeing called its best ever contract offer. The proposed offer includes pay hikes, signing bonuses, and added benefits, but the union says that still doesn't go far enough. And the timing couldn't be worse for the struggling plane maker, which is already grappling with safety scrutiny, production troubles, and supply chain woes. Here's our report on what's driving the walkout and why it just might compound Boeing's already growing list of troubles.
A new strike is adding to Boeing's mounting troubles. A fresh wave of disruption has hit the American aerospace giant, this time from its defense division. For the first time in over 3 decades, more than 3,200 union workers who assembled Boeing's fighter jets in Missouri's St. Louis and Illinois plants have walked off the job from midnight. The reason? Workers overwhelmingly rejected Boeing's final contract offer. But what exactly was on the table? The 4-year contract included an increase in the average wage by roughly 40% and included a 20% general wage increase. It also included a $5,000 ratification bonus and also included more vacation time and sick leaves. The workers, represented by the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, said the deal fell short. It did not account for rising living costs, healthcare premiums, or the complexity of their work.
Our members build the aircraft and defense systems that keep our country safe. They deserve nothing less than a contract that keeps their families secure and recognizes their unmatched expertise.
Interestingly, this is Boeing's first defense strike since 1996, when work stopped for over 3 months. These workers assembled some of Boeing's most critical defense assets: the F-15 fighter jet, the F-A-18 Super Hornets, the T-7 trainers, and the MQ-25, an aerial refueling drone being developed for the US Navy. They also support missile and munitions productions for the Pentagon. In fact, the strike hits a division that accounts for nearly 30% of Boeing's revenues, and it could not come at a more critical time. Boeing's defense unit is currently expanding manufacturing facilities after winning a major US Air Force contract to build the next generation F-47A fighter jet earlier this year. Still, the plane maker insists that it's business as usual. Boeing says it's activated a contingency plan, keeping operations running with non-striking staff.
We're disappointed our employees rejected an offer that featured 40% average wage growth and resolved their primary issue on alternative work schedules. We are prepared for a strike and have fully implemented our contingency plan to ensure our non-striking workforce can continue supporting our customers.
Boeing's new CEO, Kelly Ortberg, also downplayed the walkout during a quarterly call with analysts and investors last week.
The order of magnitude of this is much less than what we saw last fall. I wouldn't worry too much about the implications of the strike. We'll manage our way through that.
But the strike comes amid wider troubles for the plane maker. Boeing is already struggling with commercial delays, supply chain disruptions, and renewed questions over safety standards. A fatal crash involving a Boeing 787-8 operated by Air India in June has cast fresh doubts over its safety record. The tragedy killed over 240 people on board the flight. Crashes and mishaps involving the 737 MAX jets have also drawn global scrutiny. The strike also follows an earlier walkout last year, when 33,000 workers at Boeing's Washington state plants struck for 2 months, halting the production and costing the company billions. The Pentagon, which is Boeing's largest defense customer, has so far remained silent on the issue, but with talks frozen and no new offer on the table, the strike now threatens to derail Boeing's recovery, just as it struggles to stabilize on multiple fronts.
And finally, in a world where wireless gadgets dominate everyday life, former U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is raising eyebrows and questions about technology, most of which people take for granted. During a recent appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Harris revealed she still uses wired earphones, but not out of nostalgia, but because of serious privacy concerns. Now, citing her experience on the Senate Intelligence Committee and access to classified briefings, Harris warned against the assumption that Bluetooth devices are safe from surveillance. Her remarks have since gone viral, sparking a wave of online reactions and reigniting the debate over digital security versus convenience. Take a look.
Move over conspiracy theories, there's a new panic in town. And it's being led by none other than Kamala Harris. The former US Vice President recently gave social media a collective shiver when she revealed why she refuses to use wireless earphones. During a chat on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Harris, while flipping through exclusive behind-the-scene images from a new memoir, 107 Days, stopped at one, showing her in sweatpants taking calls with a good old-fashioned pair of wired earphones. Why the retro tech? Harris said that she served on the Senate Intelligence Committee and has been a part of classified briefing. She further added that do not be on a train with your AirPods thinking no one can listen. The former vice president added that wired earphones are a bit more secure. That one quote was all it took. The internet spiraled. A mix of paranoia, jokes and side-eyes flooded the comment sections. People started wondering if their sleek Bluetooth earbuds were Trojan horses for eavesdropping agencies. Harris did not stop there. She admitted she's been teased for sticking with wires. But security, she insists, isn't something she's willing to compromise on, because Harris knows what she knows. It wasn't Kamala Harris's first time sounding the Bluetooth alarm. Back in 2021, Harris had already raised eyebrows when she called wireless headphones a potential security risk. But this time, when visuals and viral clips were involved, the message seemed to hit harder. But still, not everyone's buying it. So who's actually using what? Data from a 2024 Cantor Media survey reveals that nearly 45% of US adults use some kind of headphones or earphones. Out of that group, roughly 68% are Bluetooth worshippers, while 42% US adults prefer the good old wire. According to reports, the US earphone/headphone market touched approximately $15.61 billion in 2024. Out of this, the wireless products brought in $11.1 billion, while the wired ones stood at $4.5 billion. For now, the great headphone debate rages on. Privacy warriors might stick to their cords, while the convenience crowd keeps tapping their Bluetooth buds. Kamala Harris may be in the minority, but she's made one thing loud and clear. In a world of invisible connections, sometimes it pays to stay plugged in.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank all of you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you right back here again tomorrow, and we certainly thank you for watching.
Firstpost now available in 9 languages on YouTube. English,
Stands at $36 trillion.
French,
Le FMI, comme
German,
Geschäftsführenden Direktor,
Hindi,
$30 trillion ka karjo.
Indonesian,
Pemerintah tanpa pemeriksaan.
Italian,
Sekali radikali.
Japanese,
$1 trilhão idioma.
Portuguese,
Por causa do próprio balanço patrimonial.
Spanish.
Beautiful bill.
Go to Settings, click on Audio Track and select a language of your choice. Be the first to know what's happening around you in your first language. Firstpost.